So, parables are some of the most provocative teaching aids we have in Scripture, as you know. And for the past few weeks, we've had some of the greatest. Who can forget the sower, right? The parable of the wheat and the tares. Not to mention the three that we have before us this morning. Great pearl, the mustard seed, and the treasure hidden in a field. Parables at work are wondrous things to behold. I confess that I think about the line from the prodigal son most days, where the father who looks off in the distance and he sees his son, and the scripture says that he runs to him, embraces him, and kisses him. It's quite a homecoming for those who were estranged. And as many of us who have known forgiveness, well, we probably know the feeling of that parable more than perhaps the words. And if we're feeling the parables, then we're on the right track. Then there are the interpretations of each, of which there are many. Jesus rarely explains what the parables means. He leaves that up to us as his followers to explain what they might be or to wonder about them. And that wondering has given birth to some very remarkable commentaries. And I'm not just speaking of these large, dusty tomes that you find in theological libraries, but living commentaries, ones that breathe, and are testaments of God's grace at work in human hands and human hearts. 2,700 backpacks might be a good illustration of that. Some of the best interpretations I've heard of the parables have come from my wife, Teresa, whose vocation it is to mother children, both here and across dioceses. And her stories of her interactions with these children have yielded some marvelous understandings of Jesus' teachings and proved quite demonstratively that we as adults like to complicate the hell out of everything. As if the explanations we require are considered more sound if they have more words to them. And even more important, if you can throw a term in that requires more explanation than the parable does. I don't know, simple seems better. Imagine paying thousands of dollars to read some of the greatest theologians, only to find out the heart of the message from a 9-year-old. Imagine a child sitting in front of you, wondering about the mustard seed, and you ask him, "I wonder what happened to the mustard seed." And instead of the child saying, "Well, it's right there in the scriptures, Father, it grew into a tree," the child instead says, "Well, the seed broke open, didn't it? It had to break open to grow." And maybe that's the point. God offers us a way to break open so we can grow. Imagine a child sitting in front of you as you wonder about the great pearl. And you ask, "I wonder if that pearl actually exists." And instead of the child saying, "Why, yes, it exists. I saw my dad buy that for my mom, and she wears it all the time," the child instead says, a young foster child this time, sits in front of you and says, "Maybe I'm the great pearl, because Jesus gave up everything for me." Imagine a child sitting in front of you, wondering about the treasure hidden in a field. And you ask, "I wonder where that field might be." And instead of the child saying, "The pirates must know, it's out in the ocean," a young boy holds up a plane with a broken wing and says, "That field's in my backyard. I found this treasure in my sandbox." X marks the spot, it seems. Those stories have warmed my heart many times, but I've been wondering about them more and more these past few years. and asking myself some of these questions. When have I been broken open? Have I grown from that? Is it too early to tell? When did I feel as if God called me by my name? How has his sacrifice marked my life? Do I really believe that I am beloved? When has love sought me? How many times have I missed it, though it's been right in front of my face? Where is my wealth? Where is my treasure? Is it my family? Is it money? Is it time? Is it wealth? These are real questions that, if asked and answered, well, they tell us a lot about who we are and who we think God is. And sometimes I think that something tells me that while these stories of children may have a smile now and then, their answers are far more remarkable than we give them credit for. As a measure of the profundity of the parable, I recently learned of a beloved camp tradition here in the diocese where at the end of a long day, just before bed, a parable is read to those who are about ready to go to sleep, either from the Bible or from a slender volume of stories that is passed down from counselor to counselor. And in these stories, the kids are exposed to the difference between what is a job and what is a vocation. They're introduced what is the true self versus what the image we create ourselves, and many other facets of our faith. And in listening to them, and in hearing from many of you who have returned to the church, started reading the Bible for the first time, or who now find themselves in discernment about how to deepen your own discipleship, I cannot say this more emphatically as your pastor and as your friend. Do not discount the newness of your quest or the freshness that your eyes bring to it, or the beginning of something that is profound in your life. We are, as our ancestors in faith encouraged us to do, always to begin again. And perhaps if we do that, perhaps if we're intentional about that, we just might find out what it means to be the church that is broke open. That we as disciples have been made worthy of the call to live in such a way that calls others to want to know Jesus through grace. And that the greatest treasure cannot be found by gain, but only by what is given away.